Okay. So, as we were discussing pipelining, we shall continue for some more time on pipelining before I actually switch to the next topic, which is on memory organization and memory interfacing. Okay. So let's try to wind it up, the pipelining part. So how to handle hazards. So we have already seen one of the options, that is for, so we are talking about software solutions. And the other one is hardware solution. In the software solutions, so we started discussing about software solution in the last class itself. And there are various ways. The first one is, we have already discussed about how to handle data hazards. They can be dealt with inserting NOPs and rearranging instructions. That we have already looked into it. Okay, that how basically we can insert NOPs and how rearranging can actually help us to remove some of the data hazards. Okay, I hope that you remember those examples that we do. Now, what about control hazards? Today we will look into control hazards and how software solutions can be designed. So let's take an example. Say, if you have an instruction here, say branch if R1 equals to R2, then L1, else go to, say, next instruction is move, say R3 comma R4, then say add R5 equals to R3 plus R6, something like here, and then somewhere here is your L1. Some instruction is here, L1. Now, if you look into the 5-stage pipeline, this branch instructions condition R1 equals to R2, this condition gets evaluated only at the third stage, ALU stage. Okay, and only after the third stage you know that whether you will go to L1 or you will go to here. Let's say this is another one label, next instruction. So the problem here is that whether the control goes to L1 or not is determined at the ALU stage of the branch instruction. Okay. So if that happens at the ALU stage of the branch instruction, so it means if you so let me say this is my instruction 1, this is instruction 2, this is instruction 3. Okay, so this is instruction 1. Fetch, decode, execute, memory, write back. Here happens fetch, decode, execute, memory, write back. This is for 2. This is for 3. Fetch, decode, execute, memory, write back. Instruction 4, some instruction is here. Fetch, decode, and so on. So now if you carefully look into that, only after this point of time, so this is clock cycle 1, clock cycle 2, clock cycle 3, clock cycle 4, clock cycle 5, clock cycle 6, this is time. Only after this stage, you only know that whether this will be instruction 2 will be executed or not. Now, since the condition, this branch condition is known only after the end of this clock cycle, and unfortunately, at the end of this clock cycles, if it knows that it has to go to L1, then these two instructions are already in the pipeline. If the branch is taken, we need to remove this if branch is taken. Now this is a huge amount of wastage. Okay, this is a huge amount of wastage. Hello. Yes. I don't know. I'm in a class. Why are you calling me? Transport department mein karo. I'm in a class now. Okay. So if branch is taken or not, you will get to know only after the third clock cycle. Now let's see if the branch is taken, then these two instructions are already in the pipeline, but they should not execute. Okay. One solution can be. Can someone tell me what can be a solution for this one?
2 NOPs.
Yes, I know that. The easiest solution is that you insert 2 NOPs. Whenever during the processing at the software stage, whenever you find the branch instruction, conditional branch, obviously, conditional branch, then you insert 2 NOPs for the safe reason. Now, that's a solution. We are not denying that it's not a solution, but it can be further improved. Okay, so solution insert 2 NOPs. So what if we think about further improving, because inserting NOPs, it basically wastage of clock cycles. It's a wastage of clock cycle. If you insert NOP, it will essentially stop the wrong results. That I agree. But it still inserts delay. 2 NOPs means 2 clock cycles delay. Now, is it possible, because we are talking about software solution, is it possible to find a better solution? Okay. So we call it.
Sir, we can like disable memory and write back for next 2 instructions.
Disable memory and write back for?
It will be hardware.
It will be hardware, na? That's what I mean. It will be hardware. We are talking about software solution. So imagine that you have the code written serially like this. These are every line of the assembly code. And here is your branch. This is, say, for example, your branch. So we know that these 2 instructions are creating trouble. They are the troublemakers. So these 2 instructions, if we delay the execution of these 2 instructions further, so 2 clock cycles delay, that can be possible. If we somehow delay the execution of these 2 instructions, delay means not inserting NOPs. Delay means by inserting other instructions between the branch and this. So this place, if I insert some other instructions between the branch and the actual instruction, next to instructions, that will make a delay. So by the time that delay is covered, the branch outcome is known. So this is called delayed branch. Now how to bring, which instruction to bring here? I want to insert something here. Solution is insert a couple of instructions that have no relation with the branch. With the branch condition, rather, I will say. So the solution is that I should search into the segment prior to branch. We would like to find the solution from here. Because by the logic of sequential execution, we know that whichever the instructions that are prior to branch, they must complete before branch gets fully executed. Or It's not like that they must complete, they must be in the pipeline. So what we are suggesting that if you are able to select couple of instructions which are appearing prior to branch in the actual ordering, and if you basically put those two instructions immediately after branch, so what are you doing? You are as if pushing the distance between or increasing the distance between branch and the next instruction. So what we will have to do, we'll have to pick up couple of instructions from the previous segment of the code, and we need to put them between branch and the next instruction so that their distance gets increased. What will happen? In that case, at the third stage, when the branch gets the condition checked, if the condition is going for branch, it will go there, then also no problem. If the condition is going not for branch, it will come here, then also there is no problem. But finding such instructions prior to branch which has no impact on the branch condition is also difficult. But that's why I told you this is a softer solution. You'll have to look into the instructions, find out the dependencies there itself, whether these instructions have any dependencies with the branch or not. So you'll have to find out independent instructions. Prior to branch, which can, obviously those instructions which are changing the registers of the branch cannot be moved. That's why I'm saying the instruction, insert a couple of instructions that have no relation with the branch condition. This is very important. We cannot randomly move the instructions. Let's take an example. Say we have an instruction add R1, R2, R3. The next instruction is add R4, R5, R6, and there is a branch. Something like that. Now, if you look into the order of execution, this instruction gets executed first, then this, then this, then this, or L1. So the order is 1 followed by 2 followed by 3 followed by 4, or 1 followed by 2 followed by 3 followed by L1. When not taken, when the branch is taken. These are the two paths. Now, if I change it slightly, I will insert, I'll make the order like this: 3, then 1, then 2, then 4, and then L1 is where is L1. What is the problem? So this becomes my branch. This becomes my first add. This becomes the second add. Then becomes third add, and so on and so on. So I know that if the branch condition succeeds, then although it will go to L1, but by the time when it goes to L1, 1 and 2 are already in the pipeline. So I do not need to discard them. On the earlier case, what happened? We had to discard these two instructions when there was no software solution, because those two instructions are junk instructions which have been inserted into the pipeline due to wrong order. Now, whereas in case of changed sequence, if the branch is taken, then also these two will be inserted and I will keep them in the pipeline. If the branch is not taken, then also it is fine. Then it will go in this order. So they are in the pipeline. So this is a solution which actually ensures that the instructions which are after the branch, they are delayed, their execution is delayed. So the compiler, so who does this transfer? This is a transfer of code from here to here. The organization, the sequence of code is from here to here. Who does it? Compiler transforms or transfers instructions before the branch to the delay slots. So if we can't find two such instructions, then put in NOP. Obviously, NOP is a solution that is definitely going to work, but this solution does not waste any clock cycle. Whereas the NOP solution actually wastes a couple of clock cycles. So if we can't find out any solution, it's not necessary that you will always be able to pick two such instructions which are capable of handling the situation. If you don't find it, just insert NOP. If you find it, good. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir,
Sir,
here if we rearrange this like this, then the in-order pipeline will be disturbed. Like 1 or 2 will not be completed before 3.
no, that's why I'm saying now. When in order pipeline, when you say in order pipeline, obviously this is out of order execution. Because as per the original assumption, the instructions should be executed in this order. Now, if you can resolve that, these two instructions they have no dependency. Okay, so out of order execution is possible. That's why I'm saying if you can't find out such instructions, then you'll have to go for NOP. But statistics shows that there are ways to find out instructions. So in more number of cases, you will be finding solutions that not finding solutions. That the statistics says. And particularly when it will be actually helpful when the same piece of code runs under a loop. If this piece of code runs under a loop, then you can understand that how much time you can save. Why we are basically going for such solutions? It's because if it is a single occurrence, probably running, writing an optimization into the compiler itself is time taking. Why to do it? Obviously, there is a reason for that. The reason is that if such things are detected where heavy loops are there, then you save a lot of time. These are all possibilities. I'm not saying that this is always going to save time, because when you do such reordering, you also execute a code, that compiler code. So you are overloading the compiler. So compiler will take more time to do this analysis. You can argue that to achieve something, couple of instructions to get rid of these couple of instructions, okay, or a couple of clock cycles, you are basically burdening the compiler. So there has to be a trade-off. There has to be a trade-off. But if it happens in a loop, you can understand that we can probably save a lot of time. And this obviously violates the in-order pipeline. It's out-of-order execution. But this out-of-order execution is not done. When you talk about in-order, out-of-order execution, it's basically done dynamically. But this has been done in software, so we can say that this is in-order pipeline itself, because pipeline does not know that what is the sequence. We call it out-of-order execution when the instructions are already been decided, their order has been decided. On the fly itself, we change the order, then we call it out-of-order execution. Okay, is that clear?
Sir, can you please repeat last line?
What I'm saying that that in-order pipeline and out-of-order. Out-of-order means, say this sequence is already decided that you will run the code with this sequence, and this sequence has already entered into the pipeline. In between, you found something, the hardware finds something, then you do the rearranging. That is basically called out-of-order execution. Whereas this is a software solution. Before we generate the final code, we do our own arrangement. So this is not an out-of-order execution in true sense. That's what I'm talking. So out-of-order executions in hardware, I shall discuss in HPCA course, high performance computer architecture, all the optimizations I shall discuss there. But at present, what we are talking about, we can assume that this is an in-order, because hardware doesn't know that whether this is restructured code or original code. This restructuring is done at the software level. Compiler does it. I hope this answers.
Sir, so one or two do not come into the pipeline before restructuring. They will come into the pipeline only after it is being restructured.
Yes, we are talking about software. Whenever we are talking about software solutions, even inserting NOP, it means it is done at the software level. The compiler does it. Okay, pipeline, when these instructions enter into the pipeline, that means the hardware, it is already there in the hardware. It has been decided. Okay. You can assume that as if the process control block, which actually holds this instruction, they are containing these rearranged instructions. They do not know about any kind of reordering a priori. Whatever the reordering has been done, it has been done by the compiler. These are all optimizations done at offline stage. It is not online. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. So these are the two solutions. Let us directly move to the hardware solution. Hardware solutions, again, there can be many ways to provide the hardware solution. I'll just give you a brief idea about hardware solutions. Then we will move to the memory interfacing part. Okay. What we talk about that we know that often the data which is generated or produced by an instruction is used by subsequent instructions. Okay, and because of the write back stage, the delay happens most of the time. Most of the time, the delay happens because of the write back stage. Now, let's take an example. Why hardware solution? Let's take a simple example. Add R1, R2, R3. Second one is sub R4, R1, R2. So we know that there is a dependency. So if you execute this in a typical pipeline, what happens? Your pipeline gets stalled for some time due to the unavailability of the data. This is one fetch, decode, execute, memory, write back. Your fetch starts here, second instruction. And its decode continues till this position. So you can say that this is a bubble, this is a bubble, this is a bubble. Nothing happens here. We call it bubble. And here the decode happens because this is the dependency. The value of R1 is written back only at the write back stage of the first instruction. Then only it can be used during the operand read, which is the decode stage, and then it continues. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We require 9 clock cycles to complete the execution. Two instructions are completed now. Ideally, it should complete in the 6th clock cycle. But because of these bubbles, the data is not available. So these are basically doing nothing. What we are suggesting that we can we take back the result, or can we collect the input for the next instruction even before it is written back? So when does instruction 2 needs the value of R1? In the actual, if it goes in real pipeline phase, when does the instruction 2 need the value of R1?
Decode and execute.
Huh?
Decode.
Yeah, at what clock cycle?
T3.
T3. Okay, but it's basically, you are saying that for reading purpose. Okay, but I will say that it actually requires the value in T4. What it will do with the value in T3 stage? Only just reading. If I don't read, if I don't, read it from the register file, if I get it directly at the execute stage, what is the problem? Will there be any problem?
No, sir.
So the correct answer is basically it requires at clock cycle 4. So the correct answer should be the second instruction requires the value of R1 at T4. And when does instruction 1 produce the value of R1?
T equals to 3.
Yes, that is the correct answer. But ideally, if you go by conventional way, it produces the answer at 5th clock cycle because that value will be written back. So the instruction 2 requires the value of R1 at T4 and instruction 1 actually produces the updated value of R1 at T3. So if that is the case, that actual value or the updated value, that's why I'm writing updated value, which is the final value of R1 as per the first instruction. Whether it will be written back or not, but the value is correct. The correct value of R1 is available at the end of clock cycle 3. And the correct value of R1 is needed for the second instruction is at the beginning of the 4th clock cycle. Do you agree with me? This statement, do you agree with me?
Yes, sir.
If that is the case, then why not directly use it? Let this instruction, execute, gets executed in that order it is doing for write back stage. But at the same time, I can also take the value after the end of 3rd clock cycle and give it in the beginning of the 4th clock cycle to the next instruction. What is the problem? So the correct value is already there in another stage and we can actually forward it. So this is basically called, so we can say the correct value of R1 is actually available in another stage. So we can forward it. So what we can do? We forward from M memory access to execute stage. So forwarding in cycle 4 from instruction 1 to instruction 2. That's it. So when the cycle 4 is getting executed, what happens? The value actually goes from R Z to RY. Yes, that happens, na? RZ to RY. So we will take that value and give it to the execute stage also. So a simple modification in the pipeline can actually do it. Now let me show you an example of this one. So we have now RA, this is RB. What we are saying, if this is your arithmetic logic unit, and from here it goes to RZ. From here it goes to Mux Y, then RY, and it goes back. What I'm suggesting that you take the value from here itself, you give it here. There is already a Mux B. What about this? Now when this multiplexer will be selected, you need to design the control signal for this. What will be a good scheme to design this control signal? So just by checking the destination register ID of the previous instruction and the source register ID of the next instruction, if they are matching, there is a possibility that this multiplexer can be activated. So this can be done in hardware. This can be checked at hardware. While the instructions are issued to the pipeline one after another, it checks the different fields of the instruction. That's why in every pipeline stage, we actually pass the register encoding also. The buffers between interstage buffers. Now you can understand that why we are actually passing the encoding. I mean to say that register encoding values as well as other control signals to the next stage, because those signals may be required to take such decisions. So in the previous example, when we took that add R1, R2, R3, then sub R4, R1, R2. So what it needs to do? It needs to simply do the operations like this. If source, no, if destination of 1 is equals to source 2. Source 2 can you need to check it from this one, or as well as you need to check it this one also. So you can have two more, I mean another one condition, source 2 1 and source 2 2, something like that. So R1 will be checked with R1 and this R1 will be checked. These are not the values, remember these are not the values. We are checking the register number. If the source field of the second register or the second instruction, the address is same as the address of the destination field of the first instruction, then there is a match. So that means these two registers are same. I'm not talking about their values are same. We are talking about that these two registers are the same registers. How that they can be identified? Because each and every register has an encoding. These registers are 6-bit encoded registers. Every register has its value represented in 6-bit. So if those 6 bits are compared, we know that whether this is R1 and this is R1. If both are same, we know that this value can be forwarded. Same, this can be changed. So we can easily design a hardware to generate this control signal. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Sir,
Ah.
sir, you wrote something like MA to EX. What is that? Forwarding from MA to EX.
This was memory stage. Na? MA means memory stage. EX means execute stage. This stage is what? When the value passes from RA to RZ. What is this stage?
That is execute stage.
Execute stage. When the value passes from RZ to RY, what is this stage?
That is memory.
So that's why we are forwarding from, we are taking the value in between RZ and RY. Okay, it is MA stage. Where we are putting it in between RA and RZ, it is an execute stage. That's why I wrote it. This forwarding is basically MA to EX. You can write M to E also. M to E. Memory to execute stage. Forwarding. Is that clear? What about others? Now this is one example of forwarding. I will stop here. I do not want to extend it further. There are many such forwarding possible depending on the dependencies. Okay. Here I will stop because pipeline is a complex thing which I do not want to extend it. This is forwarding path. So we design a forwarding path. This is called forwarding path. You can do it this way also. This multiplexer also can be used. Depending on what is the instruction, since it was the first operand R1 which comes to RA, that's why we have given it. If it goes to R2, then it will go through here. So with this, I'll stop pipelining. One approach I told you that how the forwarding can be done from memory stage to the execute stage for solving such dependencies, data hazards. Okay. It actually removes the entire 3 clock cycles bubbles needed. Now these instructions can smoothly run. So when this is going on, at the same time the value also goes back. The first instruction goes into the 4th stage, then it goes into the 5th stage, pipeline gets executed smoothly. There is nothing, it is restricting the first instruction to, go as usual. We are not restricting that. First, so that the value of R1 actually is written back correctly. That has to be, the R1 may be used later stage now. That's why we are not stopping the write back stage of the first instruction. We are continuing with that one, but we are just taking the intermediate value and giving it to the arithmetic stage so that it can be used. Now this is a multiplexer. Either you select it from RA or you select it from this one. If required, this forwarding can be done here also, from memory to decode stage also. That I will not discuss today. There are many other forwarding possibles depending on the sequence of the instruction. Okay, but this is one forwarding which is possible. Let me stop pipelining here. If you have any queries, you can now ask me. I will take the attendance now before I go to the memory designing part. So please respond to the attendance call. 16 batch 1022.
Yes, sir.
1036. K Jitin. 1038 18 batch.
Present,
Supriya.
sir.
1048
Present, sir.
1048 Sudhanshu. 1048 Sudhanshu.
Yes, sir.
1049 Venkatasai. 1049.
Sir, 1002 present.
1002. Where I have not called your name. Okay. 19 batch 1, roll number 1.
Present, sir.
2,
Yes, sir.
3,
Present, sir.
4. Bharat 4. 5.
Yes, sir.
6.
Present, sir.
7.
Present, sir.
8.
Present, sir.
9,
Present, sir.
10,
Present, sir.
11,
Present, sir.
12, Navneet, 12, 13,
Yes, sir. Present.
14,
Present, sir.
15, 15, Vijay, 16,
Present, sir.
17,
Present, sir.
18,
Present, sir.
19, 19, Rahul,
Sir, I'm there.
okay, 20,
Present, sir.
21,
Present, sir.
22, Udit, 22, 23,
Present, sir.
24,
Present, sir.
25,
Present, sir.
26,
Present, sir.
27,
Present, sir.
28, Parth, 28,
Present, sir. Present, sir.
20, 29,
Yes, sir.
30,
Present, sir.
31,
Present, sir.
32,
Yes, sir.
33,
Present, sir.
34, 34, Dheeraj, 35,
Yes, sir.
Sir,
Ah.
12, I was present, sir. My mic was in trouble.
I'll come back. I'll come back
Okay.
again.
Okay, sir.
35,
Yes, sir.
36, Vikas, 37,
Present, sir.
38,
Present, sir.
39,
Present, sir.
40,
Present, sir.
41,
Present, sir.
42,
Present, sir.
43,
Present, sir.
44, Akshay,
Present,
44,
sir.
45,
Present, sir.
Present, sir.
46,
Present, sir.
47,
Present, sir.
48,
Sir. Present, sir.
49,
Present, sir.
50,
Present, sir.
51, 51, Manoj, 52,
Present, sir.
53,
Present, sir.
54,
Present, sir.
55,
Present, sir.
56,
Present, sir.
57, 57, Kishore, 58, 58, Vinayak, 59,
Present, sir.
60,
Present, sir.
61, 61, Ars,
Present, sir. Present.
62,
Present, sir.
63,
Present, sir.
64, Yogesh, 64, 65,
Present, sir.
2001,
Present, sir.
2002, 2002, Dhiren, 3, 2003,
Present, sir.
2004,
Present, sir.
2005,
Present, sir. Present, sir.
2006,
Present, sir.
2007,
Present, sir.
2008,
Present, sir.
2009,
Present, sir.
2010,
Present, sir.
2011,
Present, sir.
2012.
Present, sir.
Sir, 51, sir.
16
96
by
0051.
60. I am taking the names who are absent now. Second
Yes,
time.
sir. Yes.
1036 16 batch.
Sir, present, sir. Jitin, sir.
1049 18 batch. 1004 Bharat Misra. 1012 Navneet.
Yes, sir. Present.
1015 Vijay Ketan. 1022 Udit.
Present, sir.
1034 Dhiraj.
Present, sir.
1036 Vikas. 1051 Manoj.
Yes, sir. Manoj present.
1057
Yes, sir. Kishore present.
1058 1064 2002.
Sir, he messaged in the chat box.
What he messaged. Okay. $1057. हाँ क्या है 1057 is present. $1058 is here. Vinayak. Okay, done. So that's it for the pipelining part. I switch to the memory organization now. Okay, so whatever we have learned up to now, these systems or components are mainly the internal components of the processor. Like starting from the designing of the CPU, how the pipelining works, everything on the assembly language programming, all these things are primarily related to the internal design of the processor. But other than processor, if you remember when we started the course, we told you that as per the von Neumann architecture or even modern architecture, the programs need to be stored inside a block which may be inside the processor, may not be inside the processor. But at present, we will assume that these blocks are outside the processor. Okay, so we talk about a unit that is called a memory unit, which resides outside the processor and the communication happens. A very simple diagram looks like this. We have processor to memory connections. So there are several types of connections. One is address. Usually, who generates the address? The processor generates the address. So the direction will be like this. Then we need data exchange. So address tells you that where is the data or where is the instruction. So to find the location, we need the address. To get the value, we need another path. So that's why there will be separate path. We call it data. This is bidirectional. Why bidirectional? Because the value can be transferred from processor to the memory as well as from memory to the processor. That's why it's a bidirectional. So this is very important. These directions are very important. Now, since memory is an external entity and it is a passive entity. Memory is not intelligent. Memory is a dumb entity. It has no intelligence. It can't do anything by itself. So memory, if you require the service of memory, you need to give commands to the memory. So for giving commands to the memory, we need control signals. Those control signals, you can say that for the time being, we will assume that there are two control signals. One is read, another one is write. So read control signal is generated by the processor to the memory to read something. So the write control signal is generated by the processor to write something into the memory. Read is to read something from memory to processor, and write is to write something from processor to memory. So these are control bus. Part of control bus, there may be more signals. This is data bus. This is address bus. Okay. Now, when we talk about this memory, we are talking about this is primary memory. That means the fetch or memory read or memory write. These are the three possible operations. Fetch is a special read, special memory read. Whereas memory read is basically data read. Memory write is data write. These three are the memory related stages. Fetch and memory read and memory write. We need to understand that when fetch is required, when memory read is required, when memory write is required, even though fetch is a special kind of memory read. Okay. Now, this is a very high level design of the memory system. We need to know a bit about that how this memory can be organized. So memory organization is an important component. How can we implement memory? Obviously, we will have to implement them, then addressing is an issue. How do we organize it? Okay, so that is what we shall discuss in this particular chapter. Okay. So if I say that I have a memory which the size of the memory is, say, how do we define the size of a memory? Size of a memory. So there are two things. One is size of each location multiplied by number of locations. So how do we know that how many locations are there? Can someone tell me that how do we decide that how many locations are there?
From address bit weight.
Yes, from address bits. So if we have k address bits, so we know that 2 to the power k locations or 2 to the power k addressable locations. And if each location, if the data bus is say n bits, then we know that the size of each location, we can say word length is n bits. So you can say that size of the memory is 2 to the power k into n bits. Because every location is n bits. And we have such 2 to the power k locations. Now, this memory is an external entity. Designing of the memory is not done using the same type of components that are used in designing processors for obvious reasons. Can someone tell me that what can be the reason? Any idea that why can't we use the same set of circuits for designing memory that are used in processor designing?
Registers are used, right? That will
Yes,
be
registers are used.
very costly, sir. Like we are using in modern day also, like 64-bit, 64 process registers are there, and it is so
Right.
costly. And if we use memory, like it will be 2 to the power k locations, means these must 2 to the power k into n registers will be very costly.
So yeah, so we need to understand, that's right. What you said is absolutely right, that they will be costly, but we need to understand that why it will be costly. That is why basically, that is what we are going to learn. And how basically this can be, there can be a balance. But one point, if you do not use the same type of circuits that are used inside the processor, that may lead to another problem. Can someone tell me what kind of problem?
Speed differences.
Yes, delay. That's speed difference. So it will create a lot of delay. And that is the reason we need to come up with a trade-off. If you design this memory using circuits that are not as fast as the processor, then you are going to compromise on the speed. If you design the memory using the same type of circuits that are being used in processor, you are not going to make it with a cheaper cost. It will be highly expensive. So these are the two important parameters. One is the speed, another one is the cost. So let me factors affecting memory designing. So we identified that speed, then cost. So if you increase the speed, the cost will be very high. If you decrease the cost, the speed will be very low. We need to come with the balance. The another one feature of memory designing is that these memory locations are all random access memory. Can someone tell me that why do we call it random access memory?
Any address bit we can access like randomly any address that will be available.
Can you repeat it?
Like sir, we don't need to go to that, like in hard disk we need to go to that particular sector and then fetch it. It rotates that, like it is not randomly accessible, but in RAM we just feed the address and in like big O of 1 we can say like it is accessing data.
So then I need a we are probably going in the right direction. I need a scientific answer, an engineer's answer.
So constant time to fetch from any location.
Yes,
Is
absolutely right. So we need the access time. So access time is fixed. We can't tolerate variable access time. Like in case of magnetic tape, even in case of magnetic disk, the time to reach to the next block may vary. Whereas in case of random access memory, because these are based on decoders, whether you decode the first line or the last line, the circuit time is same. The delay in the decoder circuit is same, whether you get the output through the first line of the decoder or the last line of the decoder, because of the number of AND gates and OR gates that are layered into the decoder. You know that the first line will be activated at say X nanoseconds. The second line will also be activated after X nanoseconds because the gate delays are same in the decoder. That is the reason we get fixed access time, and that actually helps. If the access time is not fixed, then your pipeline designing will be very complex. But Even if you ensure that your access time is fixed, there are several other challenges. What is the order of access time? So, if you look into the access time of typical, what I will say, typical your primary memory, do you have any idea what is the order of access time?
Microseconds.
It's basically in the order of hundreds of nanoseconds. Hundreds of nanoseconds. Or maybe 50 to 100 nanoseconds. When you talk about dynamic RAMs, which are used in modern day RAM design, hundreds of nanoseconds. So in DRAMs, dynamic RAM, access time is in the order of 50 to 70 nanoseconds. Whereas in static RAM or SRAM, the access time in the order of 0.5 nanoseconds to 2.5 nanoseconds. Whereas in case of magnetic disk, the access time is 5 milliseconds to 20 milliseconds. Now, if you look into the cost, these values may be slightly older, but these values can be scaled up accordingly. The DRAM cost comes approximately, I'm giving in terms of US dollar. Again, these are conservative values based on maybe 5-10 years back. $20 to $75 per gigabyte. May not be that much these days. Okay, it has come down even further. Whereas if you go for static RAM, this one can go up to $2,000 to $5,000 per gigabyte. So if you would like 1 gigabyte of static RAM to be designed, your cost can vary from 2,000 US dollar to 5,000 US dollar. It's a huge amount. If you look into the magnetic disk part, the same price goes down to 20 cents to probably $2 per GB. Now, static RAMs are used inside processor. cache memory. Whereas dynamic RAMs are used for primary memory. And magnetic disk is for secondary storage device. Because what is we require? Ideal memories. Ideal memory should be access time of SRAM and capacity and cost per GB as per the magnetic disk, which is not possible. The ideal memory should be we have a memory that has access time, static RAM. They're very fast. Whereas the cost is $0.2 per GB, which is the cost of the disk. Okay. So we shall now see that how the static RAMs and dynamic RAMs can be designed. Let's first see into designing of static RAM. Using CMOS, let's say we are using a CMOS static RAM cell. CMOS static memories. You know, CMOS stands for complementary metal oxide semiconductor. Okay. So how a cell of a typical CMOS SRAM is designed? How many transistors are needed and how it works? That is what basically we are going to now look. So the diagram looks like this. These are not connections. Okay, these are crossing wires. They are not connections. Okay, wherever the connections will come, we will make them bold. So this is a very simple circuit of a statigram. This statigram will be, I will show you that it's CMOS version later on, but let's first, see this with respect to couple of transistors and two NOT gates. So this is a latch basically. If you look into it, what it does basically, it stores the value continuously. It's a latch. Okay. Whatever is X here, X bar, it comes X. So this is basically storing as long as these NOT gates are active. Okay. It stores X, it stores X complement. So X equals to Y complement, that is being stored here. Now how this circuit is activated? There are two lines. One is word line. This word line is used to activate the circuit for reading or writing operation. So that is basically when you make this word line high, that means both these transistors are on. Both these transistors are on. If both these transistors are on, then either you can give the value here for writing operation, or you can sense the value here. So when you do the sensing, reading operation, then you just sense the voltage here and here. You get the value B and B complement. So this type of circuit actually provides the value stored as well as its complement value. And this is 1 bit. This is for 1 bit representation. So how the read operation happens? In order to read the statigrams, this particular statigram cell, the word line is activated. So what we do? Word line is activated. So what it means, T1 and T2 are closed now. So T1, T2, these transistors are closed. That means there is a path. So whatever the voltage at X, that will be basically passed through here with a sudden drop of this T1, and that can be sensed here. So if you have a sensing circuit which can sense the voltage here, you will get the value of X here with obviously the drop, because this passes through this transistor, there will be sudden drop. Those electronic equations you can, for the time being, you can forget it. With the sudden drop of X, you will get it here. So that ensures that whatever the value is here. So if you basically activate this word line, whatever the value of X here, it will come here, and whatever the value of Y here, it will come here. Now by the logic itself, you know that X stores the value and Y stores the complementary value. So whatever is needed, you use it. If you use the actual value, you use it B line. If you require the complementary value, you use the B bar line. So it's always B and B bar always complements of each other. So the sense and write circuit at the end of the 2-bit lines maintains their states. So there will be sense circuit and write circuit. Sense circuit will sense the voltage, write circuit will basically apply the voltage here, desired voltage here, so that the next value is stored. In the write operation, what happens? During the write operation, the sense or write circuit drives the bit lines B and B complement instead of sensing. So it places the appropriate value of bit line B and its complement bit line B bar and activates the word line. So the voltage is applied here and its complement voltage is applied here based on the logic what you are going to store, and the word line is activated. So that performs the write operation. So this forces the cell into the corresponding state, which the cell retains when the word line is deactivated. Now, once it is written after some time, obviously this has some time. So let's assume that that time is known to us. That's why read time and write time, there is a time required because the value should settle down here. So after that time, if you withdraw this word line, what will happen? Because this is a latch, the value will be continuously stored here. So that is called the write operation. Now, this portion of the circuit can be implemented using complementary logic. So complementary logic means you use CMOS transistors. You require 4 more transistors. So if you basically convert this circuit into CMOS, how it becomes, it looks like this. So a CMOS SRAM cell looks like this. This is T1.
So earlier was SRAM.
This is also SRAM. This is the detailed design using a CMOS circuit, the complementary circuit for the latch.
Okay.
Sir,
Hmm.
can you explain again last time?
I'll come, don't worry. Let me design this. Now, this is the same circuit. What I have replaced, the AND latch, not latch, which was there in the previous circuit. I simply used a, so this part is nothing but this portion. This part is nothing but this. So this is represented using a CMOS logic here. This complementary metal oxide semiconductor, not latch. Probably this circuit has been discussed in your digital electronics course. Okay, this one is a complementary. You can see that there are opposite types of transistors here. Okay, so this complementary latch actually ensures that whenever the value is, whatever the value is here, it gets the complementary value here, and whatever the value here, it gets the complementary value here. Okay. So let's assume that how it operates. Let's assume that X point is voltage. This is logic 1. It's a logic 1. So if it is logic 1, if you can look into this, this logic 1 is actually connected here. Okay, connected here and connected here also. And this is connected here. So this logic 1 is connected here and connected here. Okay, what does it mean? If it is connected here, that means this path is off, this transistor is off. Okay, this is on. This is on means this is connected with the ground. So this Y point is now connected with the ground. So if the Y point is connected with the ground, that means it is a 0, Y is 0. So when 1 is here, 0 is here, and opposite logic works here. So because this is a P-type transistor, this is an N-type transistor. P-type transistor, when it is logic, when the gate voltage is high, then it is off. When the gate voltage is low, then it is on. Okay, so you apply the VCC here. So whenever the logic 1 is here, whenever the logic 1 is here, VCC cannot pass here because this transistor is off. But ground can pass here because this transistor is on. Since this transistor is on, so there is a path. So whatever the voltage is here, that voltage will be here. There is a direct path to the ground. That's why applying 1 makes here 0. Now if you apply 0 here, then this transistor is on. So this VCC appears here. This transistor is off. So you get, and this transistor is on. Okay, so accordingly it works. When it is 0, you can see that this transistor is on. Okay, this transistor is on. So the VCC can be observed here itself. So you get a logic 1 here itself. Okay. And since this is 1, this transistor is on, this gets a 0. So this value is continuously stored. When it is 0, it is 1. When it is 1, it is 0. So this is a complementary logic of a latch gate, not latch. Okay. And these two transistors, T1 and T2, they are basically used to pass the logic. So if you are reading, say 1, say X logic is 1, you want to read it. That means you need to sense this value. So reading means sensing. So this is sense or write. The circuit is sense or write. So sense means read. So it will sense the voltage. So when your objective is to sense the voltage here, what you do, you just read the voltage. So for reading the voltage, what you will do, you will make this line high. Whatever is X here, it will come here. Whatever is Y here, it will come there. Now by this latch, we already know that whatever is here, its complementary value is here. So that's why if you read B, you will definitely read B complement here. Is that clear now?
Yes.
So this is a simplest design of CMOS RAM cell. Now why it is expensive? It is very fast. Fast in a sense, all are transistors. But it is expensive because if you need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In addition to the sense circuit, you require 6 transistors to implement 1 bit. So we require 6 transistors to implement 1 cell. And that leads to cost, because putting these transistors in so close areas also it requires complex circuits, complex designing, all these things. Not only the cost of the equipment, but also cost of the design, its fabrication itself, everything involves. That's why this is costly design. But this is fast because these are purely transistor based. The delays will be read delay. What will be the reading delay? The reading delay will be this transistor delay. Only the time required to activate this transistor. Write takes a little bit of more time. That's because you need to ensure that the voltage gets stabilized here. But reading is very fast. This is called SRAM using CMOS cell. Okay. We shall see how the dynamic RAM can be designed using very small number of components, and then we will see that why the cost is less in case of dynamic RAMs. But all the registers, cache memory, they are designed using all flip-flops and everything, they are designed using static RAMs. So you know that for each and every bit storing, you require 6 transistors. That is the reason it is expensive. So if you have, say, 100 gigabyte of storage, and if you would like to implement it using SRAM, 100 GB is a huge number of bits requirement. So 100 GB into 6 number of transistors. So 100 GB itself is a huge number. 1 kilobyte is 1000 bytes. So 8,000 bits are there for 1 kilobyte. 1 KB equals to 8,000 bits. Am I right? Sorry, 1 kilobyte, na? 1024 into 8, approximately 8,000. That's why I wrote
8192.
Yeah, 8196. 8196
2.
bits. Now, if you multiply it into 1024, it becomes 1 megabyte. 1 megabyte. If you multiply it 1024, it becomes giga. So 3. It's a huge number. If you simply remember, this is 8,000 into 1,000 into 1,000, just for simplicity. So 8 into 10 to the power 9 bits. Now into 6. It's a huge number of transistor requirement. This is 100 crores or something like that. It's a huge, probably 800 crore or something like that. So 8 billion transistor. You can't afford it. That is the reason we don't go for designing primary memory using static RAMs. But these circuits are very fast. So that's why we keep one intermediate memory that is not of the order of gigabytes, but in the order of kilobytes maybe, or sometimes maybe megabytes. That's why we keep it cache memory. So the cache memory, which is fast, is implemented using statigrams. In addition to the registers are always implemented using statigrams. Because registers are limited in numbers. You have 64 registers. Every register is 64 bits. So 64 into 64 into 6 number of transistors. That's fine, okay. Anyway, we know that a particular processor requires maybe 1 billion transistors. Okay, that's fine. And even for that also, you know that the cost of the processor is very high. That is the reason why it is costly. It's because of the number of transistors. And its floor planning and other things also. Okay. So with this, I shall stop today. We'll finish this memory part in the next class itself, Friday's class itself. Okay.
So what will we do in the COA lab this week?
Today's COA lab.
On Friday's COA lab.
Assignment is already given, na? So you'll be doing that only.
Yeah.
There is no other assignment. Okay, if somebody has already done it, I will start evaluating that.
Okay, sir.
Sir. Sir, for that assignment, I had a doubt. Like, we have to prepare the assembler table, like for all the combinations or for the code that